What if I told you that you're not actually depressed, but awakening? What if this emotional darkness you're facing isn't a curse, but a sacred initiation, one that no one ever explained to you? In this video, you're about to uncover a truth that has been hidden beneath the surface of your pain. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a profound journey inward, toward the very core of your soul. Carl Jung once descended into that same abyss. He didn't study it from afar. He plunged into the chaos, into his dreams, his fears, and the shadows that haunted him. He heard voices that weren't metaphorical. He saw images not drawn from imagination, but summoned from the deepest layers of the psyche. And when he returned, he didn't come back with theories. He came back with fire. Today, you may be standing at that very threshold, confused, exhausted, disconnected from the world. But what you may not realize is that you're crossing into what Jung called the initiation of the soul. It's not something that happens in temples or rituals. It happens in the silence, in the stillness, in the hollow spaces where your old self begins to crumble. So don't run from the silence. Listen, because within that silence, something ancient calls to you, and that voice is your own. Stay with me. What you're about to hear may forever alter the way you understand your suffering. You probably can't even pinpoint when it began. There was no clear day, no single wound, no one dramatic event that tore you apart. It was something slower, subtler, like smoke slipping in beneath the door of your life. At first, just a subtle pressure in your chest, then a silence that spread through your thoughts. The things that once lit you up began to seem distant, unreal. People kept talking, you kept nodding, but inside, you were fading. You started calling it depression. Everyone does. But what if it's not that? What if it's not the end of you, but the beginning? Jung spent 6 years in a descent into this very darkness. He didn't call it a breakdown. He called it a descent into the self. And from that descent was born the most mysterious, powerful, and sacred work he ever produced, the Red Book. A book so intimate, so dangerous, that he never wanted it published while he lived. A book filled with symbols, madness, dialogues with gods and demons, and above all, a message for people like you, who feel like they're standing on the edge of oblivion. You're not depressed, you're awakening. And this isn't about shallow spirituality or quick fixes. This is psychological alchemy. This is an inner exorcism. Because right now, your passions feel dead. You wake up tired. You no longer care about the goals you used to chase. People ask you what's wrong, but you don't know how to answer. You cry in silence. You pretend to be strong because the world expects it. But Jung discovered a truth while walking through that same darkness. Depression isn't always a malfunction. Sometimes it's the soul withdrawing from a life it no longer recognizes as true. You're not broken. You're being called inward, pulled into the underworld of your unconscious. And like Jung, you're not meant to escape this chaos, but to walk through it and to be transformed by it. The Red Book wasn't a diary. It was a map, a record of what happens when a human being stops performing and starts facing everything they've repressed. Jung called this his confrontation with the unconscious. He had visions. He heard voices. He met archetypal figures within himself that shattered the identity he thought was real. And what he found there wasn't madness. It was truth. So let me ask you something. The question that threads through every word of this message. What if the reason you feel numb is because the version of yourself you've been living no longer has anything left to say? What if your depression isn't caused by a chemical imbalance, but by a spiritual imbalance? What if the life you've built, the roles, the titles, the accomplishments, was never really your life, and now the mask is decaying and your soul refuses to keep acting? This is not a breakdown, it's a spiritual rebellion. Jung said something that should strike you like thunder. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But not you, because if you found your way to these words, it means you've already begun to sense the truth. Pain isn't random, it's a message. Your depression isn't just speaking about your past, it's revealing the false identity you've clung to. So let me paint an image that Jung would have understood better than anyone. You're in a house. Every room is full of people. You've smiled. You've played the roles. You've kept the peace. You've tried to belong. But now, without telling anyone, you've walked down into the basement. It's dimly lit. It's cold. And for the first time, you are alone. This is where most people panic. They rush back upstairs, desperate for noise, comfort, distraction. But if you stay, if you sit in that dim silence long enough, something strange begins to happen. You start to hear whispers, not from the outside world, but from a deep corner within you. And one of those whispers says, "I've been waiting for you." That voice is your true self, the one you abandoned in order to survive, the one who never wanted to be perfect, only whole. The Red Book was Jung's testimony of what happens when you choose not to go back upstairs, when you stay, when you sit in the darkness and face the chaos, not to find answers, but to listen. At first, all he found was confusion, monsters, fear, blood. But he kept listening, and eventually, he found his soul. So what does this mean for you? Maybe you don't need to numb yourself. Maybe you don't need to snap out of it. Maybe what you're experiencing isn't a disease to be cured quickly, but a rite of passage that demands reverence and courage. Maybe, just maybe, you are not falling apart. You are being stripped down so you can finally meet yourself. Maybe what you need isn't to fake another smile or adjust your attitude just to fit in. Maybe what you truly need is to surrender, to stop resisting, to allow the outdated version of yourself to slowly dissolve. Maybe you need to sit in the silence long enough until a deeper voice, your own, finally begins to speak. That's the real purpose of this message, to flip the script that society has imposed on you about what depression really is. You are not weak, you are not lazy, you are not broken or doomed. What's happening to you is not a malfunction, it's a calling. A force older than any social construct, older than your pain, older even than your thoughts, is pulling you inward. You are being summoned by your unconscious. And if you have the courage to truly enter that abyss, you may never return as the same person. But that is precisely the point of going in. So let me ask you again, what if you're not depressed? What if, for the first time in your life, you're finally listening to the voice you've been running from all along? And what if that voice is you? We've been led to believe that this darkness is a personal defect, a lonely labyrinth we alone have wandered into. But what if I told you this feeling was never meant to be a medical sentence? What if it was always a door that Carl Jung himself dared to walk through, when he let go of everything he thought he was, his career, his theories, his identity, even his sanity. He didn't write the Red Book to escape the darkness. He wrote it to face it, to hear it, to uncover the wisdom hidden within it. We live in an age that has sanitized depression, reduced it to a chemical imbalance, a serotonin issue, a buzzword like self-care. But Jung understood something far more terrifying and far more liberating. He believed the only true purpose of human existence was to bring light into the darkness of the soul. To Jung, the soul didn't retreat from consciousness because it was damaged. It retreated because it was being ignored by your masks, your attachments, your desperate need to seem normal. So what did Jung do when the soul withdrew? He didn't try to fix it. He didn't run. He followed it into visions, into myth, into madness. The Red Book is the record of that journey. A descent into symbolic landscapes, endless deserts, ancient serpents, war gods, divine mothers, forgotten towers, and ruins that still whisper. Jung called that inner world the collective unconscious, an ancient spiritual ecosystem, older than your history, your culture, or even your name. And in that chaos, he didn't just find shadows, he found messages. Jung encountered Philemon, a prophetic and wise figure who guided him through the madness. Philemon wasn't real, but he was true. He symbolized the inner guide we all carry, the one who only begins to speak when everything else within us has gone quiet. Then came the Red One, a dark, seductive force, representing desire, destruction, repressed passion. Jung didn't fight him. He didn't run. He listened, because these figures were not hallucinations. They were fragments of his own psyche, forgotten, rejected, buried. And here's where the truth hits hard. For Jung, depression was not the absence of happiness. It was the eruption of truth. The truth about friendships you maintained out of inertia. The truth about dreams that were never truly yours. The truth about the masks you wore for years just to feel safe. So the soul revolts, not with screaming, but with numbness, fatigue, apathy, disconnection. It shuts off the surface noise because it needs you to go deeper. This is why Jung's experience matters now more than ever. He stopped treating the unconscious as a disease. He began to treat it as a language made of symbols, of dreams, of sudden moods, of emotions that defy logic. What we call depression, Jung called initiation, a psychic death. And like all deaths, it's chaotic. You lose motivation, you lose clarity, you lose people, you even lose the self you thought you were. But buried beneath the ashes, something else is trying to emerge. A version of you that is real. A self that no longer performs. A self that no longer apologizes for existing. Let's be honest, this awakening is not beautiful. It feels more like decomposition than revelation. You may isolate yourself, cry for no reason, feel rage, shame, guilt, even spiritual nausea. You may stop wanting anything. You may feel dead inside. But Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Because becoming real is not a convenient choice. It is a sacred offering. You give up the need to please in order to be whole. You give up the need to be understood in order to be authentic. You give up comfort in exchange for life itself. Here's the hidden truth. What we often call depression is actually the surface name for a soul undergoing radical reorganization. And society wants you to numb it, avoid it, distract it, because a person who wakes up is dangerous. They can no longer be manipulated. They stop chasing counterfeit love. They walk away. They see through masks. They live from truth, not from approval. That's what the Red Book revealed. Not just visions, but liberation. So if you feel like you're losing your mind, if your old world seems to be dying, if you can no longer fake your smile, don't be afraid. You are not broken. You are being born. Born as someone who no longer needs to play dead just to be accepted. Someone who no longer waits for permission to feel. You are not regressing. You are not falling apart. You are waking up inside a reality that was never designed to contain you. And that pain you feel, it's the weight of a larger soul trying to fit into a life that has become too small. It's the sound of your inner world cracking open. It's your unconscious screaming, "This life is no longer enough. Become something more." And that is not depression. That is awakening. Nobody talks about what happens after the awakening begins. We hear about healing, about growth, but not about that stretch in between, where it feels like you're dying slowly, not physically, but spiritually. Because when you finally stop pretending, when your soul starts pulling you inward, when the world's noise fades into nothing, what remains is silence. And that silence is deafening. You thought awakening would feel like light, but at first, it feels like losing everything. You stop craving the things that used to define you. You stop chasing the things that never truly nourished you. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real life begins. You stop connecting with the people you used to laugh with. You walk into familiar places, but they feel foreign now. The music you once adored suddenly sounds hollow. Your ambitions slip like sand through your fingers. You no longer recognize yourself, and that's terrifying. But it's also the only way forward. As Jung revealed in the Red Book, enlightenment doesn't come from imagining beings of light. It comes from bringing the darkness into consciousness. And that darkness isn't outside of you. It lives inside, in the parts of yourself you've suppressed to be liked, to fit in, to survive. So what happens when the soul begins to awaken? Your relationships begin to collapse, not with explosions, but quietly, like bridges crumbling under weight they were never built to hold. Conversations lose their spark. You start to realize it was always you who listened the most, who made peace, who fixed things, who bent over backward. And one day, you just stop. You stop being the first to reach out. You stop laughing just to avoid tension. You stop watering friendships that have long since withered. And when that happens, people start to say, "You've changed." They say you're cold, distant, different. They're right. You're no longer the same. You finally stopped pretending. And then grief shows up. Grief for yourself. Yes, grief. Because that version of you, the people pleaser, the perfectionist, the tireless, the silent, the strong, that was just a mask for survival. And even though it hurt you, it also protected you. It helped you move through a world that rewards obedience, not authenticity. So when you begin peeling off those masks, one by one, don't be surprised if you feel empty. But that emptiness is not the end. It's a sacred space where something real can finally be born. And then comes the emotional whiplash, a brief moment of peace, followed by anger, then tears, then numbness, then a strange clarity, and then despair again. You begin to think there's something wrong with you. But Jung would say, this is exactly right. Because when the unconscious surfaces, it brings everything with it. Childhood wounds, buried guilt, unspoken rage, hidden desires, cloaked in shame. They don't rise up to destroy you. They rise to be acknowledged. Until now, they've ruled your life from the shadows. But now, they emerge into the light. And yes, it's chaos, but necessary chaos. Suddenly, you no longer chase anyone's approval. It's not that you've grown cold. It's that you finally understand the truth. The things that once filled you, the praise, the numbers, the likes, now echo with emptiness. You pour your heart into something, and no one responds. And it doesn't crush you anymore. You speak your truth, and if people distort it, you let them. You realize that the need for validation was a quiet addiction, one that numbed your soul. And once you break free from that addiction, you discover a new craving for silence, for solitude, for self-respect. And then something unexpected happens. You become a mirror, not because you talk too much, but because your unmasked presence begins to disturb others. Your calm makes them feel judged. Your clarity unsettles them. Your boundaries make them feel abandoned. Your truth exposes theirs. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just being yourself. But many won't like what the mirror reflects. And sadly, that's not your burden to carry. You're not here to beautify their reflections. Carl Jung reached this very threshold in his Red Book, a place marked by solitude, visions, internal conflict, and an aching hunger for liberation. He stepped into the abyss of the unconscious with no map and no guarantee of return. He lost friendships. He was called insane. Even his professional peers distanced themselves from him. But he didn't turn back, because he couldn't. When you've looked your soul directly in the eyes, you can no longer pretend you didn't see it. You can no longer unsee its presence, and you certainly cannot go back to living as if it doesn't exist. Let's be honest with each other. This process of awakening doesn't arrive according to a plan. It doesn't check your calendar or notify you ahead of time. It can take weeks, months, years, but it always leads you to one inevitable destination: truth. And truth, it's not gentle. It doesn't show up to comfort you or sing you lullabies. It comes with fire. It burns illusions to the ground. But in the ashes, there's clarity. Pure, unfiltered clarity. You start feeling lighter. Not in the sense of happiness that makes you want to dance or laugh all the time, but in a way that feels anchored, real, centered. You feel stripped of the unnecessary. Maybe not happy in the conventional sense, but true. And that kind of truth brings a joy that doesn't need a smile to validate it. So if you find yourself now, in this moment, lost in darkness, trembling in uncertainty, engulfed by confusion, listen closely. You are not alone. You're not broken. You're not dying. You are transforming. Everything false within you, every performance, every mask, every illusion is crumbling. And it's supposed to. Let it collapse. Because beneath that debris, something sacred is waiting to be born. You've already felt the pain. You've already dwelled in silence. You've lost people, energy, your sense of identity. So now what? You are no longer who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. You are in the sacred in-between. And that is where the true self is born. Not from effort or empty affirmations, but from surrender. Let's speak clearly now. To free yourself does not mean to escape. It means to integrate. Because if you run away from your pain, it will simply wear a different disguise and return. If you deny your shadow, it will reappear in other forms. Addiction, toxic love, false success. If you avoid descending into your depths, you will live a half-life, numb and fragmented. Jung didn't become great by avoiding madness. He became great because he entered it willingly, with eyes wide open. And when he emerged, he didn't bring back theories. He brought fire. This is the real path to freedom. Not as a defense mechanism, but as a soul rebirth. Let go of the need to be understood. You've spent your whole life explaining yourself, explaining to parents, to friends, to society. No more. You were not born to be understood. You were born to be whole. And being whole means some people will call you selfish, cold, distant. Let them. Being misunderstood is the price of authenticity. When you stop chasing validation, you set yourself free, and your truth becomes your armor. Accept that you are not who you once thought you were. That identity was shaped in fear, in pain, in the constant pursuit of approval. You thought you were strong because you didn't cry, that you were kind because you never said no, that you were healing because you were always busy. But now you see it. None of that was healing. It was compensation. Letting that version of yourself go hurts like death, because it is. You are burying the part of you that only ever wanted to be loved. Don't hate that part. Don't judge it. Thank it. And then gently release it. Keep walking. And finally, create a new ritual around your silence. In the Red Book, Jung thought. He listened. He wrote. He painted. He walked. He meditated. He transformed his silence into a sacred temple, not a prison. Let your silence do the same. Let it speak to you. Let it show you the things your busy mind never dared to look at. Silence is not empty. It is full of truths that have always been there, but the world was never quiet enough for you to hear them. Now finally listen, and let that echo rebuild you. When the old world collapses before your eyes, resist the urge to rebuild using the same bricks that already betrayed your soul. Don't rewrite the same story with the same ink that once poisoned your spirit. This is the time for a new code, one that doesn't trade your authenticity for acceptance, one that doesn't seek applause but inner alignment, one that finally and fully honors the soul that waited lifetimes to be remembered. Do not sacrifice your peace for the approval of others. Let this be your new code of living, a silent but powerful inner law where you no longer chase after things that leave you feeling empty, where your peace becomes sacred ground, untouchable, unwavering. You begin to walk away from what once drained you, and you do so without guilt. You speak your truth plainly, without the need to soften it for anyone's comfort. You stop defending your worth because it stands self-evident. You love, yes, but you no longer beg to be loved. And this inner code, this new compass, becomes your anchor. Because the world will try to pull you back. It will attempt to lure you into your old patterns, to seduce you into fitting in again. But when it does, your new self will smile. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. And it will say, with calm and strength, I don't live there anymore. The label of depression is heavy, but it's not permanent. It can feel like a sentence, like a verdict that defines your identity. But listen closely, even if it makes you uncomfortable. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your wound. You are not merely a chemical imbalance in the brain. Yes, your pain is real. Your suffering deserves compassion. But it is not the deepest truth about you. There is something deeper, something ancient, something sacred that has always lived beneath the surface, quietly waiting to be rediscovered. Carl Jung didn't see depression as a dead end. For him, it was never just an affliction. It was a rite of passage, a descent into the sacred underworld of the soul. Not a collapse, but an initiation. The Red Book did not offer solutions. It offered a mirror that shows you not how to go back to who you were, but how to become who you really are. So stop trying to return to the version of you that existed before the darkness. That person never truly existed. That was the mask, the performance, the illusion. Now you act differently, not because you're afraid, but because you finally see things clearly. You say no without guilt. You leave the rooms that silence your spirit. You rest before you burn out. You stay silent when the world refuses to listen. You stop performing for love. You let your silence speak for you. And most importantly, you no longer need external validation to feel real. Because you've remembered something timeless. You were real long before anyone ever rewarded you for being so. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about shedding everything you never were. That's what Jung did. And when he returned from his own descent, he didn't just come back with theories. He changed the course of psychology. He transformed how we understand the soul. Because he dared to face what most people run from, his own abyss. And you have that same power, but it won't come through fighting. It will come when you finally surrender, when you sit in your own fire and learn to listen to the silence within it. You were never broken. You were buried. And now you rise, not perfectly, but authentically. You begin to walk differently, no longer for applause, no longer for attention, no longer to be seen or admired. You walk with gravity. You walk with presence, not to impress, but simply to exist. And yes, you will lose people along the way. Let them go. You will question yourself. Keep going anyway. You will feel the ache of solitude. But in that solitude, you will meet someone you've long forgotten. Yourself. The one who never abandoned you. The one who weathered the storm. The one who sat beside the shadows. The one who breathed through the emptiness and never gave up. And now that you've seen the truth, you will never trade it again for comfort or acceptance. So here it is, the final line that echoes through every soul that has dared to descend and return. You are not depressed. You are remembering who you are. And you are not done. You are just beginning.